What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boys over here at Three Man Weave. I'm your co-host CJ here with my lovely co-host ZD on this Wednesday night, July 23rd. We have a sorry. How are you doing, ZD? That's what I meant to say. Sorry, I was about to get
Man,
into
I'm
the my bad.
Captain. I'm good, brother. We appreciate the intro, man. Like I always say, above ground, so I'm feeling good. We got a great, couple things to talk about. Not a ton of roster moves. Kogi's moving on. There's a couple other things that are going on. We talked about Marcus Smart last time, but Kyle Filipowski winning the Summer League MVP. So shout out to the Jazz.
Child,
But
yep.
yeah, man, I'm doing good, bro. From a hoops perspective, just excited for the season to get underway. And yeah, man, I had a pretty good day today. Got in the gym. It's a little hungry, but how you feeling, brother? How you doing?
Feeling good, bro. Just, hit the gym as well. It's always good to get that, not out of the way, but get that done. Kind of have the rest of your night to, do your obligations
Yeah.
and stuff. So I'm excited, man. Just, looking at this outline, excited for, what we have on the docket for the listeners and the viewers. I feel like this episode is going to be really good. Just kind of diving into the tiers of the Eastern Conference, like playoff tiers for the Eastern Conference. But and then we're also going to be talking about the Indiana Pacers, their offseason files. So excited to get into it, man. I appreciate anytime we're able to chop it up, sit down, and
Works.
hop on the court and just talk hoops, bro. So I'm excited, man. Excited to get into this episode tonight.
Yeah, I got you, man. We can kick it right off, bro. Like you mentioned, we doing the playoff tiers today, so we'll go through each of the conferences and kind of give you guys our assessment on where these teams stand. As we go through the offseason files, you guys are getting an opportunity to hear about their, cap sheet, some of the acquisitions, the offseason acquisitions they've made, and then some of the on-court improvements they can make as well. So, yeah, let's get right into it, man. We're going to start. I want to start from the bottom up. Is that cool with you,
Yeah,
CJ?
yeah,
Just so we
that's
can give people, they got to wait a little
wait,
second to
yeah.
get to the,
I
the
like that.
meat. Yeah, the sausage pause. But
Hey, yo.
yes, sir. Let's start. This tier is called the lottery risks. There's four tiers. So this tier that we're going through right now is called the lottery risks. You guys don't know what the lottery is in the NBA. They have this session before every single draft. All the worst teams in the NBA get an opportunity with ping pong balls, and they get a drawing for the NBA draft. And the luckiest team, which is why they call it the lottery, gets the number one pick. So these teams are the teams that Three Man Weaves thinks that are probably going to be at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. So starting it off, just get right into it. Unfortunately, the Washington Wizards are our first team who's most likely going to be a lottery risk. They're just in full rebuild mode right now, bro. We've spoken about them a little bit. Alex Sarr, Trey Johnson, they've added Cam Whitmore. They got rid of Jordan Poole. They added Chris Middleton. They have some veteran guys that can help lead their team, but they just haven't. We were talking about it before we got on. They haven't shown us that they have taken that next step. I think it's going to be a challenge to add Trey Johnson into the mix just because to me he should dominate the ball and be getting a lot more opportunities than he probably will be. And to me, I think that's going to be questionable if he's not attempting 15, 16 shots a night. I think that could really hurt his development. They've kind of been in limbo since Bradley Beal and John Wall departed. They had the Kristaps Porzingis year, and like they've been running around with Jordan Poole and trying to make things work. They got rid of Kuzma as well. I still think they're just figuring out the roster. I think they have a good core. Adding Alex Sarr to the offensive game plan should be number one behind, obviously in front of Trey Johnson's development. I think Alex Sarr should be their main guy just because he has a bit more of experience. But I don't think they should be shying away from letting Trey Johnson run the offense and just give those guys as many opportunities as possible. I haven't spoken about Bilal, but he's been great too in spurts. Bub too. Like they have some younger guys who are special. It's not like the Wizards are like they don't know what they're doing, but I think it would be in their best interest to be in the lottery and just continue to build through the draft. It's not to say that they couldn't shock us, but I think it would do more detriment to be in the play-in or the playoffs just because they wouldn't have an opportunity to get as high of a draft pick. But they own all their picks, so it's not like a big deal. They can tank and be okay. But yeah, bro, I mean, Unfortunately, Washington has been in purgatory for the last couple of years. I mean, if you have any other thoughts about that, then you can add them. But if you agree with me, and I know you do,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the Wizards are most likely going to be one of the worser teams in the NBA, and that's just been the case for the last few seasons. And until they prove that they have an offensive identity, and to be honest with you, I think they're better on defense right now. But until they create their offensive identity, I think they're going to be a question mark, and that's unfortunate because I love DC, bro. I love the Wizards. I've always been a supporter of them, kind of quietly. I just want that, bro. Imagine if they went to the finals or something like that, man. Like what that would do for the NBA and just like I know you guys have been waiting a long time. So CJ and I are with you. We feel your pain, but unfortunately, Washington Wizards are our first team in the lottery risk tier. But moving right along, it's the Charlotte Hornets. This is another team that unfortunately has yet to prove us wrong. We want to see them do well. They have Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball. They've added a couple other guys to the mix who make it interesting. They also have Miles Bridges too, who's a part of their core. But Con Knuppel, Liam McNeely, I would argue they had one of the best drafts this past year, and hopefully that translates to the upcoming season. LaMelo Ball staying healthy is the most important thing for the Charlotte Hornets. CJ might ask me a question about it later in this segment, but I feel like they could surprise us. They're one of the teams that could shock us here. I feel comfortable putting them in the lottery risk tier just because of what they've shown us previously, and they've been poorly mismanaged. Since Michael Jordan sold his part of the squad, it's just been kind of an interesting thing in their front office. I think they've made a couple really good draft picks, and I think that's why they are potentially a surprise team, is because those guys could blossom and they're healthy. Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball are one of the scariest duos in the NBA, no doubt. But as of right now, they're building around draft picks, young guys, and unfortunately, that doesn't lead to a lot of wins unless you are the Thunder. I just think the biggest question mark for them is if LaMelo Ball can stay healthy and be the all-star that we know he can be. The Hornets could potentially shock the world, though. Don't count them out. The Eastern Conference is battered, so that really anything can happen. I think any of these teams that we're going through have a chance to be in the play-in. It's not like any of the like Wizards, Hornets, the next team we'll talk about too. It's not like those teams can't potentially get into the play-in, but I think it could be doing them more detriment to be good as opposed to just staying where they are and moving forward on their timeline. Right. But do you have any other thoughts you want to add about the Hornets, or are you good with that?
No, yeah, you nailed it right on the head, bro. Pause. It's just the main thing with the Hornets is their health. Of course, LaMelo Ball, but also Brandon Miller. He was injured last season, but that was his first huge injury in the NBA that had him out for a decent amount of time. But obviously, when your two essentially cornerstone pieces are injured, it's kind of hard for you to build momentum. And it's like you said, it wouldn't be a surprise if they did make the play-in. Like you said, obviously we have to rank these teams into tiers, but it's, like you said, a detriment to the future of their franchise just because realistically they make the play-in, they potentially get that 8th seed. Like, yes, that playoff experience is great, but I would think they would much rather have a lottery pick in this upcoming draft just to potentially get that number 1 pick or get a top 3-4 pick, whatever it is. So no, yeah, you got it right there, bro. It's I wouldn't be surprised. I know we were kind of talking highly of them after their draft, and their draft was really well. But like
I was gonna say, I think they go over their win total. I think it's in I think it might be 30s, low 30s. Mm-hmm. I think they go over. Mm-hmm. I think not by much. It might be a game or two. Mm-hmm. But I think the Hornets are still, like, if those guys can stay healthy, that total, I think it's 32.5. That total is too low on their season. Like, I think they get 35, 36 wins.
Yeah.
There's no reason why they can't do that. So, like you're mentioning, I think they, out of the entire list, because we haven't gotten to the next team, but that in the lottery risk section tier, right, this is the team that potentially could surprise us the most. So shout out to Charlotte. I know you guys have been waiting a long time to be good. You guys got some nice pieces to build around. You guys are in a good spot. I would argue definitely more mature than where the Wizards are. So props to you guys on that. But the Eastern Conference is really just a slugfest. It's going to be bad. So we're going to see. But moving right along, man, I'm going out to New York, but not the Knicks. Brooklyn Nets, man. Um, we've seen what they've what their franchise has turned into after the Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant departures. They haven't been able to accumulate any continuity. I think McCall Bridges leaving, Cam Johnson leaving is D'Lo, right? That's kind of like their exit from their last half of their team. They're now moving on to full rebuild mode. And Cam Johnson, Michael Porter Jr., all of their draft picks that they have, Danny Wolf, right? Like they are going to be building around a young core, and it's not going to be pretty. I know, Drew Timmy was hooping, like they should totally sign him, but they just don't have a ton of veteran leadership to be able, like I just don't see them really like getting out of the lottery here. I think it would be in their best interest again to stay here. And Cam Johnson to me just isn't really a player you can build around. I think he's a great secondary or kind of like tertiary scorer. Like if you had him plus another superstar, it would be really good. But I don't know what that team is going to turn into. And
MPJ.
They haven't been able to.
Team. Cam Johnson's on.
Yeah.
Cam
I was talking Cam Thomas.
Oh, Cam Thomas.
My bad.
Gotcha.
Like Cam Thomas will be not the best player to build around in my opinion, but
I agree.
If that's what the Nets are going with, then hopefully it pays dividends. But I don't think MPJ, Cam Thomas, and the supporting staff is enough to really move the needle. And I don't think they're trying to. Like I think they're just trying to see what they have with their draft picks, and then going forward, like who's going to be on the roster for a long time. Maybe they're looking to flip MPJ. I don't really see him being a franchise cornerstone, but I could be wrong. We'll have to see what type of season he has. But I think, the Nets have been in purgatory too. They're similar to the Wizards. They just haven't had a ton of playoff success since KD stepped on the line, and it makes sense. They haven't had anybody on their roster that has impacted winning in that way.
No, yeah, they drafted like 7 rookies or something this past draft, 5 rookies, whatever it is. So they're definitely in a development year. So they're just trying to figure out who's going to stay on this team long term, who's going to be our franchise pieces, if we even have a franchise piece. Like you said, I don't think MPJ is one unless he just proves us wrong and has an incredible year. But even if he is, he's second or third scorer that on a championship team, obviously with the Nuggets. He's not supposed to be the guy. So, and like you said, Cam Thomas, great player, but he's also not a player that will win you a championship. So it's kind of, they're in a weird spot, like you said, but like how the East is right now, these lottery teams, probably besides the Wizards realistically, but even the Nets, I mean, if they find some continuity within their roster and they end up making the 9-10 and making a play-in, like you said, that's not in their best interests, because I think they would rather have a lottery pick to potentially find out who their franchise player is. But like you said, the East has just been so open, and that's what we're going to keep saying throughout this whole segment. But I don't see them doing that well, like you said, with the young guys they have and no real veteran leadership in that locker room. It's going to be a rough year for them, and it has been since, like you said, the departure of KD, Harden, and Kyrie. So it's been
the biggest what if story probably ever in the NBA so far. Until somebody until we get another team like that, I don't know. But that's what makes me feel bad for Nets fans is, if you're a diehard Nets fan, like you've seen it all. So I hope you guys can win eventually. And I think like CJ is saying, there's some opportunities to do so this year because of what's happened to the Celtics and Pacers. But that finishes the lottery risk tier. Nets, Wizards, and Hornets. So if those are one of your teams, we are sorry, but unfortunately that's where you guys stand. But moving right along, man, we going towards and playing hopefuls. We feel like here on 3-Man Weave, these next few teams are teams that can potentially and most likely will make the play-in as long as they're healthy. But let's start it off with an interesting squad. You guys will like this one because they were not good last year, but it's the Raptors. It's the Toronto Raptors. You could put them in the playoff spot if you want. I think it'll be interesting to see how Brandon Ingram gels with that team. They have a lot of ball dominant scorers on that roster. Those four guys is probably, I mean, outside of their starting center, who I honestly, since they got rid of Olenek, who would that be?
Is it Pirtle?
I think it'll be Podol. That starting roster is really good. I was gonna say their starting lineup's very good.
Right.
Um, their bench is just the issue, and then Grady Dick figuring out how to implement him into the offense is going to be interesting. I think Bi has come to, you know what? He's not going to be the guy. I think he's come to be a secondary player to Scotty Barnes as long as Scotty Barnes can stay healthy. And similar to the Hornets, if Scotty Barnes can stay healthy, you might be looking at a playoff team. The Raptors could be a playoff team, seventh, sixth seed, and I would not be shocked if they have a healthy roster and they go out there and perform really well. But until they prove to me that they can have that continuity, because again, just IQ's been out. I think RJ's been in the lineup. Scotty's been in and out of the lineup, and trying to add Bi to the mix, it's going to be tough. I know they're not going to gel immediately, but in a battered Eastern Conference, as we continue to bring up, they have an opportunity to make the plan solidified, and I think they'll be a much better team than they were last year, just based off their improvements. It's going to be exciting to watch Toronto basketball. I think last season I didn't turn on a bunch of Raptors games, but this year with Bi and some of their younger core, and like I said to you before we started recording, they have one of the best like cores you could say in the NBA. Scotty Barnes, Bi, right, RJ, and IQ, but it's just like who else besides Grady Dick?
Right.
And at times Poto, like you're not getting too much from that roster. So we'll see how their bench does really, and I think that's going to play a really key role in how many wins they can get.
Yeah, they're like you said, their starting lineup is honestly, like you said, one of the better starting lineups, especially in the Eastern Conference. It's just who's going to be that guy? I know they drafted Colin Murray Boyles, and then they have like some guys, but besides, like you said, Grady, it's that bench depth is super thin, so it's going to be figuring out, if one of the players get injured, then it's kind of going to be a tough season. But if they stay healthy, I don't see a reason for them not making the play in. Honestly, like you said.
Yeah, and there's ways to get around it. They can stagger. They can ask if somebody wants to come off the bench. I think Emmanuel quickly, he's going to run the show from the point probably. But if there's anybody who could go to the bench, it might be him whenever they're running a bigger lineup and they just let RJ handle the ball or Scotty. But outside of that, I don't think RJ, Bi, or Scotty's willing to give up their starting spot. It would be IQ, and IQ's the point guard.
Yeah.
So he's probably not going to go to the bench.
Right.
And so they'll just have to stagger. They'll have to figure out what they can do. But they're in a good spot. So shout out to Toronto. Hopefully Air Canada can do something. But moving right along, this team made the plan last year, but it's none other than the Miami Heat. And the Heat, they've lost some key veterans, Jimmy Butler, Kevin Love, right, which was kind of interesting that they let him go. I think this season comes down to what Hero and Bam can do. It's all on their shoulders, bro. No more Duncan Robinson, Jaquez, Jovic. Like, they have a young core. I'd say they've gotten a lot younger this offseason, and that's really good for them. But what is that young team going to be able to achieve? We saw Kalel Ware have a semi-breakout year in his rookie season. What's he going to be like? Is he going to add a three-point shot that's consistent? The Heat can be dangerous, though. I'm not going to ever put them in a lottery risk position because they have a tenured GM and Pat Riley and a tenured coach and Eric Spoelstra. And those two, that duo has gotten teams to the playoffs, the finals that shouldn't have ever been there. So I'm not going to doubt their acumen and what they've been able to show us. So for example, Hornets, poor track record. Heat, great track record. So that's where that decision comes into play, right? Their roster may not even be as good, but man, they are a dangerous threat to any team. We saw them. They did get, at times they competed with the Cavs. We saw glimpses of what the Heat could be. Davion Mitchell. There's a lot of things that they have hope around, and I think they are a better team than the Raptors are to me because of their bench and the depth and the continuity that they've had. Those guys on the roster, know what's expected of them. The Haywood Highsmiths, they come in, they give you energy. Their bench is never really an issue. And that plays, a key factor, especially going deep into the season. I think at the beginning of the year, it's going to be important they get off to a good start. If they have any injury to Tyler Hero or Bam, they are in danger of falling out. So the Heat are solid. The foundation's definitely shifted, but there's no reason for them to be in the lottery risk tier. So we got to make sure we put them in the play-in hopefuls and give the credit where credit is due. So shout out to Miami. You guys are not going to win the championship, but yeah, D Wade, but I wouldn't be shocked if we see you in the play-in, in the playoffs, bottom 7th, 8th seed.
Yeah.
Yes, but this next team was also in the play-in. They did not show us their full capability, but we saw what they could do at the end of last season. And it's none other than the Chicago Bulls. Kobe White, Josh Giddey, they're the main core of that franchise. You could say Mataz Buzelis is also added to the picture. They're interesting. They are, again, they're not a team. They're always a team that's there. They're never really necessarily they are technically in the lottery, but they are always competing for play-in because the East is so poor. And so they've been in limbo since Levine and DeMar DeRozan departed. Similar to that team, the Vucevic, that trio, they weren't really able to get anything going. Now they've shifted to a younger core, and that's really exciting. I would argue the Chicago Bulls are in a really good spot moving forward. As long as they continue to build around Giddey and Kobe White, I think they'll be okay. I will say this, I don't expect, out of these three teams, I would argue the Heat and Raptors are more likely of a play-in team. I could see those two teams kind of doing really well, but Chicago plays well, man, and they have guys that can come off the bench and contribute, I would argue, more than the Raptors do. So that's, another key factor here is whenever we're talking about your depth in a full roster, we have to look at more than just your starting lineup. And even though the Bulls don't have the most firepower, it's spread out, which can do some more damage than teams that is very concentrated, right? Concentrated is the Raptors.
Right.
They have a great starting lineup. There's nothing left on the bench. That can be an issue. You need to have that spread throughout your roster. That's what makes the Thunder so dangerous. But I think the Bulls can look to move Vooch. I don't think he needs to be there. It's the last thing I had in my notes. I think he's kind of the last breed of that trio, Levine, DeRozan, Vucevic, but I think you can flip him now for maximum value because he's performed pretty well over the last 3 to 5 years. Double-double machine pretty much.
Yeah.
So at a pretty high clip. I think that's the one thing that shocks that it doesn't shock me because they need somebody who's competent with Giddey, but I think it shocks me a little bit because they can build that through the draft or just clear up some cap space that they don't need to be spending such a high number on Vooch. But the Chicago Bulls are definitely a play-in hopeful. They're not a lottery risk. They've shown what they can do last season at the second half, and they've always been in the play-in contention for the last 3 to 5 years. And so I think they'll may not improve, but I don't think they'll drop off as long as those guys can stay fairly healthy.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly. That's how I feel too. Especially seeing how they played really at the second half of the season. They kind of figured out their play style. Kind of up tempo, just kind of scoring essentially. And I think that's kind of their identity that they need to really lock into. And they still haven't even extended Giddey. I think that's still probably one of the biggest surprises for me so far in this offseason that he hasn't gotten it. I think they're just probably trying to figure out how much he's worth exactly. See if anybody's willing to pay
he's
him.
One of the toughest players to
value
assess.
Yeah. Just because he's a great player, but realistically, he just can't shoot. That's the only thing. And I'm going to be very blunt with it because, he was on the Thunder, so I saw the type of player he is. And I knew that he's a great player, a great, initiator, kind of do it all type of, point guard. But the only thing that lacks is that jumper. And I think that's such a huge thing in the NBA now that it's affecting his, how much money he's really worth. Yeah, so, but no, you had it right on the spot. They're always a play-in team. I know a lot of Bulls faithful. That's kind of a weird spot for y'all to be in, just because I feel like you you want to compete, but it's like, are you going to be a lottery team? Are you going to be a play-in team? That's kind of been what their franchise has been for the last 4 or 5 years, really since the 2020s. They've always kind of been in limbo, essentially, just not really. They
Exactly.
they catch fire and they start winning games, so they go up in the rankings, and now they're a playing team, but they were a lottery team 2 weeks ago, and it's kind of figuring out what exactly they're going to be, because obviously the playoff experience is great, but you're always, if you do that, you're lowering your chances of being able to get a higher draft pick, and I think that's more valuable for them. But with the roster that they have, like you said, it's a solid roster, and they're probably going to make the play in again. So it's a weird spot to be in for the Bulls, because you have a lot of young guys, you want to get that experience, but also you don't really have anyone else besides Giddy and Kobe White. You have Mataz, like you said before, but they're still developing. They're developing, but they're good enough to make the play in the Eastern Conference. So it's kind of a weird situation. So intrigued to see what they end up doing. Seeing how much Giddy's going to be end up. His contract's going to be worth. That's going to be interesting for me to see. But yeah, no, they have a good roster. They're solid. I think they just need to focus, lock in on that offensive side of the ball, and just kind of realize that's the type of team they have, and kind of build off of that. Going into this season, I wouldn't be surprised if they're literally like 9 or 10, to be honest. Maybe if they get higher, I mean, hey, more power to them. But like we've been saying, it's kind of a weird situation to be in with that
Yeah, it's
roster.
weird. They've got to show us something for sure. But
Yeah.
moving right along, man, these are the should be playoff teams in this tier. All of these teams we feel like are pretty confidently in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So we'll start off with the Celtics, my foe. But yeah, the post Tatum injury era begins. I mean, we saw what they did with we've seen what they did with Drew Holiday. They added Anthony Simons, and they've just got to retool. Like, they're not a championship contender right now, and that's okay. Jaylen Brown, there's a lot on his shoulders coming up next year. We'll see what he can give us. I wouldn't be shocked if he's an all-star. It's just when you're missing a guy of that caliber, who I would argue is a top 5 player in this league, it's gonna be, you're gonna feel that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even I don't even try to bash on the Celtics too much, because it's like, obviously I'm a Lakers fan, but like, looking at their roster, I would be pretty shocked if they were a top 4 seed,
Yeah, me too.
which is kind of interesting. We thought the Celtics would be a championship contender for a long time, and I think this is the first time where I'm confidently saying you could put them in the middle of the pack. I'm not expecting a championship run per se, but don't count out Joe Mazzulla, Peyton Pritchard, Derek White. All those guys are seasoned veterans. They're going to be cooking still. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not going to be the same without Tatum. And obviously, you guys know on this pod, even if you don't like watch basketball, you probably heard about the Tatum injury. That's what changes their roster here. I think if he's on their team playing and he's healthy, they're a contender team, and it kind of shows you the importance of having well, they have an MVP caliber type player. I always say Jaylen Brown can play to that level. He's a Finals MVP and a solidified one, but he's not Jason Tatum,
Right.
and he's not Jason Tatum from just the 3-point. Really, I think that's kind of what separates JT, and just his ability to facilitate for others. I think we're going to have to see Jaylen Brown turn into a better passer this year, and so I'm excited to see that. And yeah, he's going to have to grow a lot, and so I know he's ready for the challenge. And yeah, their championship window has likely closed for the next foreseeable future, so they can get it figured out. And Tatum comes back and he's incorporated back into their offense. I think the Celtics are still a solid playoff team, especially in a weaker Eastern Conference. But I'm not gonna say that they're a top 3 contender.
Mm-mm. Yeah, not with that Tatum injury, bro, and especially just the moves that they made, because obviously they were in we went through their books, we kind of talked about all the second apron and everything, and they made moves so they wouldn't be in that situation. But with Tatum being out, that's such a huge hole that they're having to fill, that obviously I don't think anyone on that roster will be able to do that, even if with the additions that they've had, and even if Jaylen Brown steps up and kind of takes into that role. I just don't think they have enough firepower on that roster. Unless someone just has an incredible season. Derek White can be an all-star or something. It's likely. It's very
Possible.
likely, but just like you said, it's crazy to think because since probably the past 5 years, that the Celtics have been championship contending team, and for the first time in a very long time, that's not the case coming into this upcoming season.
Yeah.
So they'll have
No.
they'll have a
No.
chip on their shoulder, but I just don't think they have enough. I agree with everything you said so far.
Yeah. Like no Cornette, injured Kristaps. Like they lost a lot,
A
bro.
lot, yeah.
Um. So
Probably
like,
no Al
I
Horford,
don't.
I'd assume.
Yeah, I don't want to hate on them too much. I think they could be again top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, but I think that's if everything goes right, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it will.
Yeah.
There might be some injuries. There may be some things that don't go your way, but if things go right, I mean, hey, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, all stars. You got Anthony Simons getting 20.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could be completely wrong, but we just have to see.
See, yeah.
I think Anthony Simons is a big question mark too. I'm sure he'll still be trying to go out and get 20, but we'll see if how the Celtics incorporate him into the offense. Because to me, he'll have to start. I mean, that guy cannot come off the bench. He's also one of the most athletic guys on their team. Like kind of sneaky bounce. So like I wouldn't be shocked if Missoula puts him in the starting lineup from the jump. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
We'll see.
Moving into our next team, bro, we got the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo, man, just prime Giannis with Kuzma, KPJ. I feel, with the departure of Dame and Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez, there's going to be a void that's not going to be filled. Milwaukee's playoff hopes rest on Giannis's shoulders. If he has another MVP caliber season, you can bet that they're going to win more than 40 games. And, Bobby Portis and company will be doing the best that they can to help Giannis out. If Giannis gets hurt, the Bucks are in purgatory. And so it's all on Giannis's shoulders at this moment. Depending on how this season does, you guys could see Giannis Antetokounmpo in a new uniform next season. And it's crazy to even say that, but I think he's been not done wrong, but there's been a lot of mismanagement since the finals run, and that's cost him a lot of years of his prime. And he understands the time is ticking. They're still dangerous though with him on their roster, and I think even if he forces double teams, it allows for guys to get open shots. They still have some competent players on their roster, so I don't want to count out the Bucks either. They're in a similar situation. You could say that they could be a play-in team, probably nothing lower, but I'm not going to count out Giannis Antetokounmpo just because he lost Damian Lillard. I think this gives players like Kevin Porter Jr. and Kyle Kuzma more of an opportunity to score, and you can bet your ass they're going to shoot more. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing KPJ and Kyle Kuzma going to do. They're going to get up shots. I think they still have Gary Trent, Bobby Portis. Like they still have some guys that are going to make an impact. So don't count out Milwaukee. They've had a superstar there for the last decade. It just depends on how Giannis performs, and I think he's going to give you the 30, 10, and 6. So now it's just a question of is he healthy? Mm-hmm. How many games is he going to play? Is he an MVP contender? If so, Milwaukee will be in the mix. Mm-hmm. And if not, Milwaukee's not going to be in the mix because they don't have their roster isn't built out enough anymore to be able to handle a game without Giannis. They could do that in the past. Dame would handle things. He wouldn't get you 40, but he could get you 25 to 30 points, and that was enough to be competitive. But you no longer have that option, and I think that's it shows. It's funny. Celtics, Bucks, right? Tatum's hurt, Giannis in. It shows you how the difference of rosters, right? The Celtics have a stronger roster, but they're missing their best player. Right. And Milwaukee has a weaker roster, but they got Giannis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's. Really anything's possible with those two teams. So I think they're in a very kind of eerily different, similar position.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes complete
differently
sense.
Similar.
Yeah.
So Milwaukee, we'll have to see what they turn into. I saw Dame's. We didn't talk about it yet, but Dame's intro interview to Portland was super interesting. It looked like he didn't even want to be in Milwaukee, which was super interesting because that kind of signaled to me that something in their front office was just a little off. They didn't make people feel comfortable. And neither here nor there. I think the Bucks have a lot of things to figure out. But they're, they got Giannis, one of the best players of all time to me. And so anything can happen.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, bro. You explained it
Perfect.
perfectly.
I got you. But moving right along, man, I'm going to Indiana, and this is the team, this offseason files. And with Halliburton out for the year, man, we'll talk about this a little later. I think that they're not a finals lock, but they are definitely a playoff team. I still think Pascal Siakam, Nemhard, they did lose Miles Turner, but we talked about their center situation. They're trying to add, they haven't re-signed Ben Shepherd yet. They added Wiseman, they've added Jay Huff. They're trying to figure out what direction to go in there. They've just taken a massive hit with Tyrese, bro, and it's so unfortunate that a lot of our franchise players are hurt, and I think that's going to impact the Eastern Conference specifically because Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton play for Eastern Conference teams. So the Pacers are in an interesting spot of being in the finals last season and one win away from a finals championship. You could say that they're a contender, but unfortunately, with Tyrese's injury, I can't put them there. I think they're going to be lacking in the facilitation part of their offense. It's not going to have as much pace. I think Andrew Nemhard is a great player. Pascal Siakam is going to step up, and he's proven. Both of those guys have proven themselves in the playoffs. So if they can get there, anything's possible. I just, I love Indiana. I was going to bring it up now, but I don't know if they'll go back to the finals. And it's kind of the importance of capturing the moment when it's there because things like this do happen and they impact the future a lot. And we'll see what Indiana can do coming back from something like this. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I don't want to spoil too much, but they're going to have to make a lot of strategic on the court improvements to ensure that their team can still be a playoff contender, but they are no longer a finals contender without Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, yeah. It sucks, especially just off of this last season that they just had. Like you said, one win away from winning an NBA championship, and your best player goes down with the ruptured Achilles. So it sucks. Like you said, they're still a great team though. Like you said, they lost Miles Turner, but I'm expecting their bench
He's on the Bucks.
to step up. It's I think Andrew Nemhard is going to have a great season this upcoming year.
Yeah,
Potentially like MIP type of season. That's the kind of what I'm feeling just because of his role that he's going to be stepping in the absence of Tyrese and just kind of Pascal. I feel like this is a huge moment for him to kind of show us the type
I
of player
agree.
that he is, and I think that he will show the type, why he's getting paid that much money, especially being the main guy now. So it's gonna be a interesting season for them because, like I said, they have a great roster. It's I feel like
Oh,
this
such a good
past
roster.
playoff run was a great example of that. It was Tyrese and it was Pascal, but I think it just kind of spoke volume of the bench depth and just the way that they were able to adjust on the defensive side of the ball was super impressive. So it's obviously sucks, losing your best player, but I think this is a great building year for them to kind of see who else is going to stay on this roster for the foreseeable future. So it's exciting, It sucks, like I said, never want to see your franchise player go down and out for a whole season, but there's also some good things that could come from it. You could see who else is who's gonna step up, who deserves to get an extension and stay on this team for, like I said, however many years. But yeah, it's a tragic situation, but you gotta find the good in all certain things like this. So we'll
Yeah,
see how they
exactly.
end up
Like
doing.
you have to find. I love that you ended with that because there's a lot of beauty in the struggle, and you just brought up two great players in this league who are top 75 to me. Andrew Nemhard and Pascal Siakam are top 75 players in the NBA right now, and so we'll see. Like I think this is like such a great opportunity for them, and I know the air got sucked out of the building on that day in Game Seven, which was feels like a year ago,
It
but it
does.
was literally like a month and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just I know that changed guys' perspectives, and I think in a good way. But they just see like I posted something on my IG story, but things can change in seconds, bro. Oh
Mm-hmm.
man,
Yeah.
one wrong step, your whole life will change. The whole outlook that you had on what you're doing is completely different. And I think that's one of those cases when Tyrese Halliburton went down. It's just like, man, we're gonna have to do this for the next 9 to 12 months.
Yeah. Damn.
So unreal. But
Yeah, it sucks.
moving right along, dude, we got a team that did not show up last season, super hungry to be great. They have the roster to do so, and we feel like if they're healthy, they will be right in the mix. But it's none other than the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, now adding VJ Edgecombe to the mix. A lot of other guys too, Jared McCain. Just they have the roster to be good. Just the question mark is unfortunately health, and it sucks that we were talking about so many injuries, but that's the way of the game. That's the way of the NBA game, the NBA lifestyle. Play got like J Dub playing through a wrist injury, like guys are playing through injuries left and right, and Paul George and Joel Embiid not being on the court has impacted them very, very much. I don't know if you saw this, but Paul George had a knee surgery, on
Mm-hmm.
arthroscopic knee surgery. He's going to be reevaluated in 6 to 9 weeks,
Yep, I saw
and
that.
reevaluated in 6 to 9 weeks means we're going to get another update. And so that's not a good signal to me that he's going to be ready to go for training camp. We went over the summer of Joel Embiid and what's been going on with him mentally and how he feels about the season upcoming. And I think a lot of, this leads me to my next point. I just think a lot is on Tyrese Maxey's shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't seem like that from a media perspective, but I would argue he's their most important player this year because he's the only one who's been able to play.
Yeah.
And like he's a reason there. I don't. You might have saw in this clip. I might be able to find it so we can put it in the video. But LeBron last year, because Tyrese made an All-Star team, but he was like, "Hey man, I've been looking for your ass because you haven't got like." He's like, "I've been looking for you, man, because you finally got like the opportunities that we was talking about, you know."
Mm.
And so like it's been cool to see Tyrese Maxey step into that role. But even we talked about this last year, but they've even been overplaying him.
Mm-hmm.
I think Nick Nurse overplays Tyrese Maxey. 36, 37 minutes a night, every night, even though he's young, at some point, that's going to catch up to you. And if Tyrese ever gets hurt majorly, man, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
They're in more trouble than the Embiid and PG injuries that have already been a routine thing, it seems like. And yeah, if their roster is healthy, they're one of the most dangerous teams in the Eastern Conference. But I put them as a sure and playoff team, not a contender, because they haven't shown that to us, bro. And I don't think they deserve to be there just yet. And Embiid's had a couple good playoff runs. We talked about his game on Christmas that he had last year. That was the last time that we had seen all three of those guys out there getting 20, 25 points, and it was a beautiful thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that game proved to me that they can be good when
Right.
those guys are healthy. So I'm not putting the Sixers too low here, but
Yeah.
they're gonna have to show us something special. I think VJ is gonna have a great opportunity to be the player that he's always wanted to be. Athletic, get into the mid range, get into the hoop. But I think a lot is on Tyrese Maxey's shoulders moving forward, and just Joel. You brought it up when we talked about the summer of Joel Embiid, but if he can be playing 40, 50 games and give you 30 and not have to go out there every night. And maybe he's not going to win an MVP, but he's still Joel Embiid. It's a scary, scary roster to have to talk about. So we got to put him on this list. I know you agree, bro. There's really no other way to say it when you have this much firepower. And if guys are on the court, they're special, bro. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to count the Sixers out whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you said, it all just boils down to their health. Like that was a huge reason why they fell so low this year. Started off slow, injuries kind of throughout the whole season. Literally everybody got injured, so it's hard to really have it's that small sample size that we have had, but it is what it is at that point. They haven't proven to us that they can be a healthy team as of late. So I understand what you were saying. Like, yes, they definitely should be a playoff team, but I think it's if they can stay healthy. And I think that's going to be a
Yeah.
huge if throughout the whole season. Like you said, PG just had another surgery, and like you said, he's not going to be reevaluated for another 6 to 9 weeks. Like that's a long time. So it's going to be interesting. Like you said, I think a lot of pressure is going to be on Tyrese Maxey, because he is going to be carrying that load, and like you said, the summer of Joel Embiid. So I don't really expect them to play him like the year that he won
Yeah, they
MVP.
do. Yeah,
It just doesn't make sense for them at this point. You
doesn't
have a
make
lot of
sense.
young guys, and they are kind of guard heavy. So we'll see how
And they
those.
tried playing him.
Yeah,
They tried over the last 3 years. They've been trying, like you're saying, and it just
it
hasn't.
just had, yeah.
They've
So
tried.
But
So
yeah, no, they're
that's
definitely on paper one of the best rosters in the Eastern Conference. It's just if they can stay healthy, and that's gonna be kind of my last. I keep reiterating it, but they're huge what or if throughout the whole this upcoming season. But as of right now, yeah, I would say they are a playoff team in the Eastern Conference for sure.
for sure. That gives us the last team who's in the playoff mix, just right outside the contenders, the Atlanta Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sneaky team here. If Jalen Johnson's healthy, I think this team is going to be solid. They're going to be in the playoff mix. I think Reece Shea is coming into his own. I think Trey, I mean, what we saw from him last year just in the facilitation department was amazing. I think any player that's on that roster just immediately gets an increase in points because of what Trey can do. And I think Atlanta's been kind of on the back burner. I think people have forgotten about where Trey's potential can really take a team. I think adding Jalen Johnson to the mix is very solid. They've been able to stay fairly healthier, and not to mention they had the most improved player last year, Dyson Daniels, somebody who is a lockdown defender, which every team is desperately needing, and the Hawks have. They not to say their defense is going to be great, but he drastically improves their chances. And moving forward, bro, this roster is dangerous, especially if everybody can stay healthy. I know we keep saying that, but I don't think Jalen Johnson's going to get hurt. And they've shown to us that outside of him, everybody else on their team can stay fairly healthy. We saw Reece Shea play a lot of games. We saw Trey play a lot of games, which was good. He had that really clutch game winner, I think it was, right in the play-in, was it not?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah, it
was it
was.
in the? Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah,
It was like
yeah.
that. It was like to send it to overtime or
Yep.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's shown that he can improve. He could show up in big moments. And oh man, the departure of Clint Capella to me is good.
Yeah,
I think he
I
kind of
agree.
took up a lot of unneeded shots, and he's getting older. So their roster is much younger. I think they're going to be an interesting team to watch. And yeah, man, I'm excited to see that duo with Jalen Johnson and Trey and Dyson Daniels and them getting up and down. I think they're going to play with a lot of pace. It's going to be exciting, bro. Like the Hawks are kind of a sleeper team here. I know a lot of people probably didn't expect for us to have them this high on the list with the Sixers and some other teams that are competing for a playoff spot, but you got to have them up there, bro. Just their core of Johnson, Shea, and Young is going to be solid,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they had
solid.
honestly they had one of the
Best
better off
drafts.
seasons as well. They got
Yeah,
Kristaps, they got Nikhil Alexander Walker, they got Luke Kennard. Like they got a lot of good players that kind of fit their play style, and I feel like that's something that's pretty underrated in this league. People try to or teams try to get certain players to try to fit a certain mold when we've talked about it before. Don't focus on your weaknesses, just focusing on your strengths. And for a team that they weren't when you have Trey Young, it kind of opens up a lot of shots. But when you get a player like Luke Kennard, that's a knockdown shooter, and Kristaps Porzingis, who's another knockdown shooter, and then like I said, Nikhil Alexander Walker, who can kind of be that person coming off the bench, being the facilitator whenever Trey Young isn't on the court. I think they're in a great position, man. I think like you said, a lot of people might not think this, but I think with their offseason they just had, and then just coming off the year that Trey Young, Dyson Daniels had, and if
I
Jalen
know,
Johnson would have been stayed healthy, it's they're looking really good, man. Like I'm not gonna lie
solid.
to you, they're building something good in Atlanta. I think it's something a lot of people probably kind of forgot about, like the potential. What could, like you brought up, where can Trey Young lead a team? And that, I mean, we've seen it. It's the Eastern Conference Finals, and I think they have a great chance of getting there this year. So we'll see,
I
man.
agree. Yeah, the Hawks are freaking good.
Mm-hmm.
Exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're in tier one now. These are the contenders. Simple as that. These teams have a chance to make the NBA finals next year, and we think that all of these teams are title contending teams firmly. But going into our next tier, we're gonna start it off, and this is a hoop and a holler. The Detroit Pistons, man, you guys are finally here. I got to give you guys your respect. You guys took an Eastern Conference Finals team to 6 games. You guys are no slouch. It's time. Cade Cunningham. We got Jalen Dern. It's amazing to say and see their transformation over the last year and a half. all of the right moves have been made. Malik Beasley situation is interesting. I don't think that's going to hurt them too much, but we spoke about them on our offseason files, man. A lot of cap, a lot of hope, young players, guys who have been in the playoffs as well. They have some playoff experience, and I think they're going to come back with a vengeance. There's, you know who else is on this list. The Knicks are on this list, and if I say if they jump it up right now, that's a 7-game series that I don't know if the Knicks are going to win. I don't know, man. So we gonna see, bro. Like truly, and that makes me really happy for Detroit, bro. They've had a coming out party in the way that they play. They've developed an offensive identity around Cade, and their defense is really what's been really good. Honestly, I think having Jalen Duren and Thompson twin in the mix is really good for your squad. But they have the potential to be top 10 in offense, top 10 in defense, for sure. And that leads to a lot of wins. I wouldn't be shocked if they win 50 games this season. And Detroit is no slouch team. It's no longer they're at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, especially this year with the Celtics and the Pacers. I would argue they're most likely the next team up outside of the other ones we have above them. Detroit's just like, I don't even know. Like if you're a Detroit Pistons fan, I know you guys are so excited. They've just completely changed the course of their franchise, and they own all their picks. Like they have good cap. Like they're in a good spot, bro. They've done this right. They have waited a long time, and I think Cade Cunningham's coming out party last year kind of signaled to me and you that Detroit is ready for that next step. Even though they weren't able to get to beat the Knicks, who were one of the best teams in the NBA, I still think they had a great playoff showing, winning their first playoff game in years, and they're going to be right back there, bro. I would argue that they're better than a playoff contender at this point. They can stay healthy and have that continuity again, like we said, adding Paul Reed and continuing to build on what they've been doing over the last couple of years. Like they're good.
Yeah,
they're good.
Yeah. I'm kind of expecting like a coming out party for Cade this past season. I'm expecting him to solidify himself as one of the best players in this league this upcoming year. He was an all NBA, and anyways, I think he's gonna be an all NBA again if he could stay healthy. And just with the team that has been built around him, I think Jaden Ivey kind of getting back into the mix is gonna help him a lot. So they're in a really good spot. I mean, we just talked about the Pistons not too long ago, so don't want to reiterate too much, but they're in a really good spot. Like ZD was saying, man, like they have all their picks, they have great cap space, they have these young players that are still kind of waiting to see what their potential can be. Like the Thompson twin, Asar, and like you said, Jalen Duren. Like they're in a good spot, man. It's gonna be. It's crazy to say this, bro. You said it right when you started, talking about them. But the fact that they're a contender now in the NBA is a wild thing to say. Especially if you would have told me this 2 years ago, I'd have been looking at you crazy, bro. Honestly. Yeah. So it's wild. Real. It's crazy how quick stuff changes. You brought it up earlier as well. Just one wrong step or one right step can get you into a whole different situation than what you were a year or two ago. So shout out to Detroit, man. They're like you said, they're one of the better defensive teams in this league, and I think if they could kind of just stick to what made them successful this last season, give Cade, obviously he has the keys to the offense. Like I said, with Ivy coming back, might have to get some adjustment to that, but I think he probably saw the type of player that Cade is, and I think he'll be a great secondary, scorer, secondary initiator at certain times in the game. But it's exciting for them, man. I'm really excited to see what they can be. Eastern Conference, like we've been saying, guys, wide open. So I am not surprised at them being a contender at this point.
Wide open. Yes, sir. And that leads me into the next squad, who's also had a crazy turnaround over the last couple of years, and right along with the Detroit Pistons could easily have been counted out a few years ago, but it's none other than the Orlando Magic. And, at this point, if you don't think they're a contender, you're wrong. They've shown us what they can do. They are one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. However, their offense gets stuck in mud. They've added Desmond Bane, so we'll have to see about that one. Especially in a battered Eastern Conference, I no longer think they're going to be struggling on offense, which just means their team is going to get better. Orlando took the Celtics to 5 games. The Celtics were fully healthy. Now the Orlando Magic fully healthy are better than the Celtics injured. I can tell you that much. And so Franz Wagner's ascension, Paolo Banchero, that's obvious. Anthony Black, we'll have to see what Desmond Bain becomes. Jonathan Isaac, some of the guys that have been there in the playoffs. I think that's what's going to ultimately decide the Magic season. I don't think it's Paolo and Franz. I think if those guys are healthy, they're all stars. But it's just everybody else.
Yeah.
What are they going to be able to bring to the table that separates the Magic from these other contenders that we have to go through? Can they improve their three-point shooting? As adding Desmond Bain definitely does that. Is that enough? They just have to be able to gel offensively, and they'll be good. Stick with those defensive principles. I think they have a lot of guys that can contribute defensively. Wendell, right? Jonathan Isaac, like I already mentioned. But what are they going to be on offense? What's their offensive identity going to look like? The Magic being one of the worst teams in the league offensively last year. That's what really hurt them in the playoffs. Is their offense got stuck in mud. They weren't able to hit threes, generate any offense, and that really killed their momentum. They've made some offseason moves that have improved that, and I think they just have a lot of continuity. I think a lot of guys on their roster have been in a playoff position before now, and I just don't think they're scared. I think they're ready. They're here. This year, look for the Magic to have a coming out party again. This could be another team that wins over 50 games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know I know the listeners might know as well. I'm super high on the Magic, bro. I would say they're my Eastern Conference team. I really like what they've been trying to build, and reminds me a lot of the early years of the Celtics when they had Tatum and Brown, obviously, kind of figuring out what can they be. Do you need to trade one or the other? Should we keep them? This and that. I think they're kind of in that same situation. Obviously, not as great offensively, but defensively, I would say they're better than what they were at that time. But when you have players of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero's level, it's hard to bet against them in my eyes. Just because I was able to see what they were doing all season. Obviously, they had that crazy oblique injury, the same one too. So it's kind of I think their season was kind of derailed by that in a sense, because I think they could have been a lot higher seed. I think I was saying coming to this past season that they were going to be a top 3 seed, even with everyone being healthy. But I think I'm super intrigued to see what Desmond Bain can be. If he can play at that same level that he was playing in Memphis. I think that's exactly what they're missing, and someone that can score 22 to 25 points a game. I think that's what they're missing. A 3-point shooter, kind of mid-range guy, like someone that can also facilitate. And I'm excited to see what Jalen Suggs is going to be like coming to the season as well. He was injured. I think he missed majority of last season.
Last year.
And yeah, no, dude,
he was
good. He's
it.
Exactly the type of player that they want. What I mean? Defensive minded player, but also could score. So I think having having him miss a lot of the season last year kind of was a huge part of why their offense was kind of very stuck in mud at moments. But with him coming back, the addition of Desmond Bain, I think they're in a good spot to be a contender in the Eastern Conference as well. So I completely agree with you.
Love that, man. They're right there, bro. They're very close to taking that next step into really competing for a title. I think they could do so this year, especially with how the Eastern Conference looks. But moving right along, man, we got the other New York team. We've waited 30, 40 minutes now, but it's none other than the New York Knicks. Jalen Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, McCall Bridges. I think that's what unlocked their team. Adding those 2 players to the mix completely gave them a new set of tools that they didn't originally have, and that was being really good on defense. They have proven to us that they are a real deal contender. I think Cat has showed up in the playoffs. We know what Brunson can do. Last year's Clutch Player of the Year, obviously All NBA pretty much every year, and just the one of the best playoff performers that we've really seen, or in my life. And what's crazy is, I think the Knicks with Mike Brown are going to be really good still. You could argue that they don't have continuity. I think Mike Brown's going to come in and do a really good job. They did lose their coach, which is one of the most important things to winning. So I can argue, I can see the argument to be made that like, oh, they have a new coach. What's that going to do? I think Mike Brown's going to come in and immediately know what to do. And again, when we talk about a contender, the Knicks were able to almost beat the Pacers, who took the Thunder to 7 games. So
Hmm.
the Knicks are no slouch team. I think they are better than every other team that we've listed so far, and their roster is very complete. It's top heavy, but that top heavy roster has shown us that they can still get things done. Tom Thibodeau, not Mike Brown. Thibodeau did a really good job of staggering certain guys, and so while he did play them all a lot of minutes, I think whenever you get a Mike Brown, you get somebody who understands that load management part of the game. I think some things are going to be looking up for the Knicks. You could probably expect less injuries. Guys, might be playing less in games that don't matter, and that can be good for them coming up during playoff time. And so I'm excited to see what they turn into, under Mike Brown's coaching. I think it's still going to be the Jalen Brunson show. Cat JB, bro. I think were they the only teammates to make All NBA teams?
Uh, J Dub and Shay.
J Dub and Shea, yeah. Besides J Dub and Shea. Yep. So the Knicks got two All NBA players on their team, bro.
Yeah,
It's really it's tough. It's
yeah,
tough to count them out.
yeah. No, I like you said, that Mike Brown edition, man. I think obviously Thibs is a great coach. I don't want to disrespect him at all. I know we've critiqued him throughout this whole year, but I think Mike Brown coming in, I think it's gonna unlock Cat to another level. You know what I mean? We saw what he was able
Right.
to do with Sabonis and Fox and
Bonus. Yeah.
Sacramento. So it's exciting for me to like kind of think of the what that's gonna look like. Obviously, Cat's not as great as a passer as Sabonis, but what is a better offensive player, just a shot making ability, shot creation in general. So I'm really excited to see what that turns into. And like you said, with the minutes, we talked about it all season. I think they're not gonna have as much injuries throughout the season, or like at the towards the latter end of the year, like
There,
playoff
yeah,
time,
playoff.
like they're gonna be
Yeah.
pretty well rested. So it's gonna be interesting to see that, because they have played so many minutes for the past 3 seasons, 4 seasons, whatever it was, since Thiz has been the coach. But I think it kind of prepared them for a new coach in a sense. You know what I mean? Like they have already played so much minutes in a season to where they're gonna not have to put so much stress on their bodies to where they can play as much as they used to in the playoffs and probably still not be affected that much. So I'm excited to see them. Like you said, they have one of the best starting fives in the league right now. Really, the four, or yeah, starting fives for sure. I forgot. Cat's a four, or Cat's a five, and then they have OG at the four. So, but I'm excited to see what they do offensively. Obviously, it's going to be the JB show, but I think Mike Brown's probably going to have a lot more offensive schemes that Thibs didn't have, and just kind of letting Jalen Brunson cook. Like obviously, that's probably the best move to do, just the situation they're in. The type of player he is. But I think it's going to open
Maybe.
up a lot of shots for everyone else, and that's gonna help them in the long run come playoff time, because
Yeah.
if they shut down Brunson for a game, it's kind of like who else was gonna be that scorer. And we saw Cat do it, we saw McCall Bridges do it at moments, but I think it's gonna be a lot more balanced of an offense. So I'm excited to see what they can do, man. They're definitely, like you said, up to this point, the best roster as a whole. So I can't
Yeah.
complain with their placing right now.
Not at all. We'll see. Yeah, I think Jalen Brunson still get 25 a night, but I think he would probably agree he'd rather be getting like 25 and 10 than like 28 and 4 or something. So
Right.
yeah, we'll see. I agree with you. But yeah, this leaves us with the Cavaliers. You guys know, you do the math on this one. This is the last Eastern Conference team. They were the best team last year, winning 64 games. Or obviously, sorry, besides the Thunder, best team in the East last year, winning 64 games. And I don't really see them slowing down. If they can stay healthy, they added DeAndre Hunter last season as well, adding Lonzo Ball. Like there's a couple interesting moves they've made, and to me they've gotten better. I just think their balance sheet is what scares me. But like what I see on the court, Darius Garland, Mobley, obviously Donovan Mitchell too, but just that core alone has been able to do so well in the regular season, and I think how it translates to the playoffs is they need to figure out what's going wrong on defense, because I don't think the offense has been hurting them in the playoffs. It's really just their defense that kind of slows up. But outside of that, that's my only concern with them too. They are title contenders, and I think they were last season, but they just came up short in the playoffs. And ultimately, the way that it works in this league is even for the Pacers, who did really well last season, if you don't win the championship, it's not a failure, but you're still striving to achieve your goal. And I think the Cavaliers are better than every other single team that we've listed roster wise, and they're most complete. They just haven't had playoff success, and hopefully that can translate. But I am very nervous to put them at number one, just because you know they haven't shown me, but I can understand that they are the best team in the East, like roster wise, and I see it. I believe it. I know Kenny Atkinson's going to do really well scheming up different things. We'll have to see who takes this next step this season. It could be like Darius Garland giving 25 instead of just 20, but Evan Mobley, man, we've seen his ascension last year. If he can step up and do even more this season, I would not be shocked to see them win 60 games again, just because the Eastern Conference is very weak. But I don't think the Cavs, they're not a team we have to talk about too much. You guys know they're easily the best team in the East, at least in the regular season. It's just, can they do it in the playoffs? And that's yet to be seen. But for all of these teams, to be honest, it's really yet to be seen, except with the Celtics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah.
I think all of the, the East is, the Western Conference has been dominating, and the East, right? Like Milwaukee's won recently, and there's been a few Eastern Conference winners. Toronto, a few years back were quiet. It's just like I've realized going through the Eastern Conference today over the last hour, it's just like, man, I don't know which team is going to go to the finals. Like, we'll see.
Yeah.
But
yeah, dude,
I'm probably going with the Thunder.
It's like you said that. I mean, don't really have to explain much more about the Cavs, but just kind of reiterating a little bit more of what ZD said. Just definitely the most complete roster. They haven't really lost a lot of their guys. They've had the same coach. They have
no Ty Jerome, I guess.
Oh yeah, Ty Jerome. That's right. They did lose him, but they added Lonzo Ball. We'll see what he can be. But just I think as a whole, just like you said, one of the better defensive teams in the league, and just trying to figure out what is their ceiling and what can they do in the playoffs. That's kind of the questions that I have for them. You know what I mean? Because obviously they are Eastern Conference Finals type of team, but it's if you can do it in the playoffs, of course, that's what it boils down to. But regular season, for sure, I think they're probably not a lock, but I'm very comfortable. I just don't want this to come bite me in the ass, but I think they are going to be the number one seed in the Eastern Conference this upcoming season. I think it's going to be them and the Knicks battling out, but I think
do you know the team that I was the most skeptical on where their position was
in this tier?
Yeah, no, in all all the Eastern
Conference, in general.
Yeah.
No, I don't, honestly.
It's the Cavs.
I was gonna say, was it the Cavs?
For sure.
Yeah, just because
we're gonna say it on the show because obviously they're power ranked so high, but to be honest with you, man, playoff wise, I don't know.
Right.
They'll have to prove it to me personally. I see why they're a contender. We're not gonna leave them off the list, but yeah, I don't know, man. 64 win team, second round exit.
No, yeah, it's definitely disappointing.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah, disappointing.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
I guess that's a good way of putting it, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that. Yeah, they've had disappointing results the last 3 or 5 years, which is odd because they're very good.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, it's odd. But, yeah, man, if you're a Cleveland fan, hopefully you get the closure you deserve, which would be going to an Eastern Conference Finals or going to an NBA Finals. I think that's all Cleveland fans need to see. Even just going, it would show improvement for them to end this one off. For them, I think success looks like Eastern Conference Finals or bust, pretty much.
Yeah, I agree. At this point in of their timeline and just situation that they're in, yeah, for sure they got to make the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, 100%. Man, but if you guys have lasted this long, we appreciate you guys. We just broke down the entire Eastern Conference. We went through all of the tiers. So, that's the tier list. I'll name it off again. We had In our lottery risk tier, we had the Hornets, we had the Nets, and we had the Wizards. Then in the play-in hopefuls, we had the Bulls, the Heat, and the Raptors. And then in the should be playoff team tier, we had the Bucks, we had the Pacers, we had the Sixers, and then we had the Celtics. And finally, to wrap it up, the contenders, you guys know we just finished with the Cavs, we did the Knicks, we did the Magic. And then lastly, it's my favorite one, Detroit, no doubt. Just seeing them on that list and the title contenders is crazy, man. But we're gonna roll right into the offseason files. And if you guys don't know the way that we do it on this show, we go through all 30 teams in the NBA. You know, we break down there are 3 franchise players that they're building around. We also dive deep into their cap situation. So it's going to be a good little segment right here. You know, we've been trying to come at these every single time we've been doing the pod in the offseason just to show you guys, you know, what's behind the scenes on some of these teams. But today, we got an interesting one. We're doing an all Eastern Conference podcast for you guys today. But today, the offseason file is over Indiana. So we're going to go through the Pacers offseason file and just break it down for you guys. You know, we're excited to chop it up about Indiana a little more, dive into their balance sheet, and then go through some on-the-court improvements that CJ and I think they can make. But let's start it off hot, bro. I'm going to dive right into the first player that they're building around, and that's none other than Tyrese Halliburton, who unfortunately ruptured his Achilles last year, and he's not going to be playing. And it's really that simple. We're not going to get to see him out on the court. And unfortunately, this changes a lot of the things the Pacers are going to do for this upcoming season, but I don't think it changes anything in their future. And when you're building around a player this young, or players that are younger, you have to look at the grand scheme. So when we talk about grand scheme in this situation, it's like Tyrese Halliburton's ruptured Achilles. We don't know how we're going to play next season, but he's our guy. You know, the number says so. I think he's getting he's on a 5-year, $260 million deal. So it shows, you know, we spoke about it, but, you know, last year, 2 seasons ago, people were saying 45 was too much for Tyrese. I would argue that number's just right or a little bit cheaper. And I think you brought up a really good thing to mention, but unfortunately the Pacers still owe him $45 million, even though they will not be having his services. I really don't think they care because that's their franchise player. We've seen what he can do when he's healthy, but ultimately, you know, it sucks, man. They're not going to be getting what I mentioned in the notes for you guys to understand. He's an elite playmaker. He's one of the best facilitators we have in the NBA. He's also very efficient, and I would argue he's the best orchestrator outside of, you know, Trey and Luka. Really, just he can control an entire offense, and they're not going to be having that, and that really sucks. And at that number, you know, like you mentioned before we hopped on the pod, it's tough to really justify that. If somebody's not on the court and you're not going to know what they're like when they come back, you know, $45 million is a lot. But it is Tyrese Halliburton. He had a great season last year, especially in the playoffs, leading them all the way to a Game 7 in the NBA Finals, where unfortunately that injury happened. But, you know, he's obviously the number one player that they're building around. They've been building around him for the last 3 seasons. So really, they're not going to sway away from that anytime soon.
Yeah. No, yeah, perfectly
But
said.
no, the Pacers are in an interesting spot. They made that move a long time ago when they traded away their guy and they wanted Tyrese, and I think that trade is one of the better trades that we've seen. The Sabonis Halliburton trade, but they also made another great signing for them, and this is the second dude that they are building around who's in the prime of his career, and that is none other than Pascal Siakam from Cameroon. Multi-year deal right now. I think it's 4 years, 200 is the number, 198. Man, people have questioned his value. Eastern Conference Finals MVP last season. There's no more of that. I think Pascal Siakam's a top 40 player, 30 player in the NBA. Definitely has potential to be an all-star. We've seen his ability, what he can do in the mid-range and the post-game. And he's been instrumental to the Pacers really with Tyrese on the court, and especially without Tyrese on the court, he's going to be instrumental. Like you mentioned earlier, he's now the main guy. I would say he slots into the number one spot pretty crisply there. And yeah, man, you know, Pascal, we've seen him improve his game a lot. You know, even since he won a finals with the Raptors, I think he gives them some championship pedigree to really build around. And you know, with Tyrese out of the lineup, they're going to really have to figure out how to move forward with Pascal Siakam being the engine to their offense? Can he get them 25 with 4 assists, 8 rebounds? That would be a really, really good season for him. And I expect nothing less from a player of his caliber. We know he's capable. He's not the greatest 3 point volume shooter. However, he does get to the free throw line to kind of add those points in another way. So, look for Pascal Siakam to be even more aggressive than he normally is, but he's undoubtedly the number 2 player that they're building around right now for the Indiana Pacers franchise. And he's proven that. I would argue having just as good of a playoff run as Tyrese Halliburton did last year. So, to answer that question, I think he showed us why he's on the team.
Mm.
But moving right along, man, we got none other than, and this one's up for debate. You could put a couple players here if you want, but me and CJ, McConnell, right? But CJ and I believe it's Andrew Nemhard out of Canada. One of the cheaper players they have on their roster, I think at 4 years, 60 million. And that extension really kind of signals to me and you that the Pacers are willing to have this guy on their team for a long time. And there's a reason for that. He showed out in the playoffs last year, specifically guarding SGA. I would argue he didn't slow him down, but he made it more difficult. SGA was still the Finals MVP, so I'm not going to sit here and say he locked him down like they do on other podcasts, but definitely made it more difficult. And I think he's proven that he is a really good secondary facilitator to Tyrese Halliburton. I've noticed whenever Andrew Nemhard is controlling the offense, they actually had him do that last year in the playoffs even more than Tyrese at times. Mm-hmm. But whenever he's controlling the offense gets settled in. He can still score 15 to 20 points. And I think at the number, that just shows you his value, right? He's definitely worth way more than what he's getting paid. And, the Pacers are really, really happy to have him in the absence of Tyrese. I know if they didn't have Andrew Nemhard, they probably would have been bumped down a tier on this list. But since they do have a point guard, a solid guy who's going to be able to run the show, I think the Pacers will be okay and still be a solid playoff team just because of Andrew Nemhard and what he's going to grow into. Look for the MIP. Definitely a good bet to make, like you mentioned earlier. Definitely has the chance with the opportunities he's going to be getting. He could definitely improve, average 16, 17 points with 6 assists. That I would not be shocked if we got contributions like that out of Andrew Nemhard. So those are the three players that they're building around currently. They're all younger guys or guys who are in their prime. And I think that's the reason why the Pacers went to the finals right there, is that core is all 3 of those dudes were playing at an extremely high A+ level, I would say. And when those guys are firing all 3 cylinders, we see that they can make the finals with that roster. So I know you agree with the list. Hopefully my Indiana faithful, you guys are rocking with Nemhard as the 3rd spot. And yeah, man, I'm excited for you to tell us a little bit more about their cap situation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so for everyone that doesn't know, we do their cap situation and financial flexibility, and then as the next segment in our offseason files. So with the Indiana Pacers, their projected active payroll is $180 million. They're $30 million above the cap, but they're also $13 million below the first apron, so they don't have any of those penalties that we've been talking about. And they could still use their full mid-level exception, which is $12 million, sign minimum salary players, and execute aggregated trades. Since they're not apron bound, one of the more flexible teams in the NBA whose roster was relatively inexpensive compared to their performance. Like we were just saying, they took the Thunder to 7 games and were 1 game away from winning an NBA championship. And when you have a lot, we were talking about it before we started. They kind of have a roster similar to the Thunder in the way that they just had a lot of their draft picks play above their value. So it kind of has, like you said, the Andrew Nemhard just got that extension, but you have like the Benedict Mathurin's and the Aaron Neesmith's still on their rookie deals. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's no complaints from me. They don't really have a lot of dead cap or cap holds and stuff like that. So they're in a good situation. Obviously with Tyrese being out for a year, yeah, that sucks that he takes up such a huge, of your cap space, but we saw what he was able to do. So they're not complaining about that. And also with like we brought up earlier, Pascal Siakam's contract is pretty hefty as well. But I think I brought it up earlier. I think he's going to show us kind of why he gets paid that much
Why?
money and why he is valued so highly to the Indiana Pacers. But yeah, no complaints from me, bro. They look good. They have TJ McConnell on a pretty long long contract, but I think he's well worth it. I think he's getting 10 million this upcoming year, 11 the next. But Benedict Mathurin, like I just said, still on his rookie contract, and he'll be eligible for an extension. And they still have a lot of their rookies. Like the Jarris Walker that we really haven't seen what his potential can be in this league. And they just signed Jay Huff, like you mentioned earlier, and the Ben Shepherds. They still have pretty much the same roster besides Tyrese Halliburton. I know that's a huge hole to fill, but like we were saying, with Andrew Nemhard kind of taking that primary ball handler responsibilities, I think
Right.
he's not the same type of player that Tyrese can be,
No.
but I think
No.
he can do his part, and they can
Art. Yeah.
still potentially make a Cinderella run in this upcoming season, just because with the Eastern Conference being so wide open. I think like you brought up, like I brought it up earlier as well, MIP award. I think that's he should be the front runner for that, just for the situation he's in and just kind of what he showed
And what he
me.
did last year.
Yeah, what he
Yeah.
showed me,
Yeah.
man, like it was super impressive. Like you said, didn't
Makes sense.
didn't lock up Shea, definitely slowed him
Yeah.
down, and he caused him a lot of problems. So it's kind of
I
what
think
what
caused them problems.
what he was able to do on both sides of the ball. I was super impressed,
Right.
and like you said, even with Tyrese on the court, he was, those moments in the game whenever they're trying to get their offense going, he was the kind of one initiating the offense. Tyrese would be the
Right.
the main guy, like on the top of the key doing his like pound dribbles and stuff. But I think when Nemhard was on the court with him, he's like a great secondary ball handler, like I mentioned
Literally.
earlier, and he's able to still run the offense. So I think, like you said, they're definitely still a playoff team, and they don't have any issues on their balance sheet. So they're in a good spot in for that financial situation. So no complaints over here on the 3-man weave side, and I think it's
Clean
just kind
balance
of,
sheet.
yeah, the balance sheet's looking good, man.
Yeah, they he hit a lot of timely threes last year in just the playoffs. Just like they'll be down 12, he'll hit three. It's nine. Andrew Nemhard's very good at coming back, and just one of the more interesting players we have in the league. But that leads us right into the on the court improvements we know that they can make. Some of the strategic ways we know they can improve their team. They got to plan around how the hell they're going to run their offense without Tyrese Halliburton. That's number one. We've spoken about it on the show the last few times we've spoken about the Pacers, just because we know Halliburton is hurt. But they have to figure out what Nemhard can do, what Siakam can do, what's Obi going to be doing, who's going to be their center. They have to carefully navigate that and make sure guys feel confident about what their role is within the offense. I feel like you can get into trouble when your best player is out for this long and you kind of get guys used to the way that they're playing, because at some point it will change whenever Tyrese comes back. But I think the Pacers are in an interesting spot because of them going to the finals. It would make more sense. It would actually be in their benefit maybe to play without Tyrese and give guys an opportunity to get really good. And so that could end up helping them in the future. We'll have to see what Tyrese Halliburton is when he comes back off of his injury. But I think schematically they're going to have to change the way that they play. And they're no longer going to get the 15, 20 potential assists. So potential assists are different from assists. Potential assists are just the assists that the players did not make the shot. So Tyrese Halliburton's still really good at creating offense. Sometimes the shot just don't go in. But those potential assists are going to go way down just because Nemhard is not the same facilitator as Halliburton. But I think you're going to get an interesting mix of certain players. Anybody can go off on the Pacers, man. Expect TJ McConnell to be good. We're going to see who handles the load while Nemhard is on the bench. And, if they need to stagger Siakam and Nemhard at times, play them with the bench unit, do so. But I think starting off, you need to figure out what that offensive identity is going to look like without Tyrese, because their defense is solid. You brought up they had really improved their defensive metrics last year. And moving forward on, I think Rick Carlisle is going to make sure that they remember that that's their identity. Is like they're a defensive first team. They like to play scrappy. They're probably the most scrappy team in the league. So they dive on the floor. They're always hustling, and again, not a lot of teams in the NBA are doing that, and it shows why the Pacers are so dangerous. But they just got to figure it out without Tyrese.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, bro. It's kind of crazy to think that
Mm,
they're like a defensive team. You know what I mean? Because I feel like that was a
yeah.
thing whenever we would talk about them in the middle of the season, even beginning of the season, we would always say how great they were offensively. So they kind of just proved to us that you don't need to be a lockdown team or a great defensive team throughout the year. If you could kind of figure out your identity on the defensive side of the ball and just kind of, like you said, they're just scrappy. And I think that's something that's very, it doesn't get as much love as that should, because they're picking up people right as soon as they get the ball, full court pressing the whole time. They don't give up. I think that's the main thing with them. It's they're playing until that buzzer is flashes red. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's something with them that was very underrated. Like they got to stick to that, and if they do, then they could, like I was saying, potentially do something in the playoffs this year. So yeah, great point.
100%. And yeah, it leads me on to my next point, was about Andrew Nemhard. I just think they've got to clearly define his role. We've spoken about him a lot, so I'm not going to talk about that point too much. But he is, Siakam, we know what he's going to do. But I think Andrew Nemhard is probably the most important player, just in terms of figuring out the type of player that he could be. If he can take a next leap, I think the Pacers are going to be looking at a good playoff position, But if he isn't able to take that next step, I think there's a chance to be running into some issues moving forward. So we'll just have to see the type of role that he's given and the expanded opportunities that he's able to create. But this adds me to the next point. I think they need to look to add a big, bro, and their center depth. They have money available. They could use the mid-level exception. There is no centers available, so I'm not going to give you guys one because there's really not one available that would be competent. But unfortunately, that doesn't leave them with that many viable options. But losing Miles Turner really hurts.
Mm.
You're gonna have to figure out a way to fill that void, and I think the Pacers have yet to be able to do that. And what's interesting is, like, even last season in the playoffs, they really struggled to get. They gave up a lot of offensive rebounds. They struggled to grab rebounds, and now taking Miles Turner out of the equation, there's an issue for that to be the case again this season. And they are scrappy. They do hustle, but when you're potentially playing with smaller guys, small ball lineups, there's a lot more room to give up those offensive rebounds. And I think adding a big with the mid-level exception can really help in the rebounding department. If you want to add a wing, they have honestly, they have like so many wings that are so good. Like, they don't really need to be doing that. I think Mathurin, Toppin, Neesmith, like, good, but their centers, even like Jarris Walker, right? Like, he's more of a forward, I would say, but just like their center, man, their center depth, they really got to work on, and hopefully they're able to add somebody. I'm not sure. I'll have to come back with the answer for you guys on that one, to be honest. But just as it's really getting deep into the offseason, so I don't really know what type of moves they're going to be able to make to improve their roster. They did sign James Wiseman and Jay Huff, who, again, man, maybe those guys can give you something. Jay Huff and James Wiseman are both interesting projects, similar type of guys who can play off the dribble, who are much bigger centers. They're just a little bit skinnier. But ultimately, man, they don't get a center, I think they're going to really struggle in the rebounding department, and that's offensive rebounds and defensive rebounds. And if they can't get offensive rebounds, it means less chances, right? One and dones. And then defensive rebounds, it just means more chances for the opposing team. And so they've really got to figure out their lineups. Who's going to be, I don't think they're going to do double big, but who's going to be their big on a consistent basis is going to be a really important question to answer.
Mm. Yeah, I think they might be in a situation where they might have to play a lot of small ball, honestly, especially if
Right.
they
Yeah,
just
they
stick.
probably will.
Because, like you said, their center pool right now is, off the top of my head, I can't really think of a lot that would make a difference. You know what I mean? So I think it's gonna rely a lot on maybe Pascal playing a four, Jarris Walker playing a five type of situation. Maybe
Yeah, yeah,
Toppin
bro.
playing a four. They're gonna be swapping out that five a lot. I think they're gonna have, like you said, the Jay Huffs or the James Wiseman, it's probably starting. But then as the game progresses, they're gonna have to adjust to whatever the game plan is. And I just think with the hole that Miles Turner kind of left is going to be very noticeable, like you brought up earlier. You know what I mean? Like I think what he was able to provide for them was, I wouldn't say underrated, because I think if you watch the Pacers, you kind of understood what he was able to provide for them. But now with him gone, you're going to see what he was able to do, and especially with them not adding a center to kind of not replace him, but kind of you just hold his spot for the time being. It's going to make a huge difference for their
Yeah,
lineups for one, but just also the way that they play.
yeah, bro. And for people tracking, it's like Halliburton's going to be out, so you need to define Andrew Nemhard's role. They got to fill in the space where Miles Turner left a vacant spot.
Mm.
And now that leads me to my next point. Since Miles Turner is out, play the young guys. Why are you not going to play? If you re-sign Ben Shepherd, why would he not be out there 25, 30 minutes a night? Jarris Walker probably should be getting that amount of minutes. Lean into the younger core, and you're going to see a bright future. And I think the Pacers have been reluctant to do that because they did have a veteran guy in that spot. And now, some of the bigs that are able to play more minutes next year, coming up specifically Jarris Walker, I think they need to really focus on developing their young talent. And the Pacers have been interesting. They have a Pascal who's he's in his prime. He's not too old, but he's a little older. And they have Nemhard, they have Halliburton who are younger. They had Miles Turner who was like older. I would definitely say they've gotten younger. With that comes less experience. So that's why you have to work on developing your players. And I think Indiana's done a really good job of doing that over the course of some years. All these points line up very clearly, and it's all because certain things have happened to their roster. So Ben Shepherd, Isaiah Jackson, Jarris Walker, like give those guys an opportunity, and don't be afraid to play. Like we mentioned, Huff and Wiseman, they're gonna have to get some run, and those guys are young too. You never know what they could turn into, and I think the Pacers, they have to be willing to try some things that they didn't originally think they were gonna have to try, and that can be difficult. But I think they are a franchise who's willing to make those changes. They've been one of the most adaptable franchises in the NBA. I would give them a lot of credit for that. And so, yeah, bro, that wraps up the on the court improvements we know that they can make. But if they're able to do those four things, I think they're gonna be fine. They're still gonna be a playoff team, and like you said, they can make a Cinderella run all the way to the finals again. Who knows, man? Maybe see the Thunder again. Who knows?
That would be crazy, bro. That would be insane.
That would be
I'm not gonna
crazy. No
lie to you.
Hallie,
No
like,
Hallie,
yeah, but that would be crazy,
man.
dude. That would be like so cool.
That would be crazy. But yeah, yeah. Was
For
there
sure.
anything else you wanted the audience to know before we head out of here, bro?
Nah, man, it's a little longer one. We did all Eastern Conference, no Western Conference at all today. We didn't even speak about them at all. But yeah, man, it's been good. Just excited for the season. I don't
Mm.
know. I just want to get to day one of the NBA. It's tough. Tough doing these off-season files and not being like trying to watch the Pacers game right now, man.
Right.
Like, shit.
Yeah.
But other than that, bro, feeling pretty good. Thankful I'm able to chop it up with you, man. What about you? You got anything else to add?
No, man. Like you said, it was great. Like we didn't bring up a single Western Conference team, so this was cool for us because our both of our teams are in the Western Conference. So
What?
we got to
Yeah.
really dive deep into what we think this upcoming year is going to look like for the Eastern Conference, and just being able to talk about the Pacers. Like after that Cinderella, not I would say Cinderella run.
Yeah.
They made it to the finals, took us to 7, took the Thunder to 7, and they have still not the greatest position as they would have been if Hallie would have been able to play, but they have it's brighter than what people think it is. I think
Oh,
we
for
did a
sure.
great job of kind of explaining that to y'all, and giving y'all a little behind the scenes of the business and showing talking about their numbers of their contracts and stuff. So yeah, no, it was a great pod, man. I appreciate you as always for taking time out of your day and sitting down chopping it up about hoops, bro. I can't wait till the season
Right.
starts, like you said, and
Yeah.
can't come soon enough, man. It's
Yeah.
getting
Yeah,
getting
we'll have to wait, bro. Until next time, we could just turn on NBA YouTube TV, see the Octobox, and
hmm
get 8 games going.
Yeah, bro. But yeah, no, if y'all liked and enjoyed this episode of Three Man Weave, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see y'all next time, man. Peace.
Peace.
Three man.
Three man, come on now.
Yeah, yeah.